I think these vessels are kind of a smoking gun to something more significantly advanced going on in very ancient times, in that a lot of these are pre-dynastic. We know they've been around since before the dynastic Egyptian civilization started.
You don't care who's right necessarily, you just want to get to the right answers.
That there's been an interesting new paper talked about the fact that these pyramid sites were all built along what they've now discovered is an extinct branch of the Nile called the Aramat branch that would have only existed during the African humid period that ended, nearly 6,000 years ago. And I think it'd be really interesting is if we could apply, some of these new space-based satellite technologies that are able to penetrate through material to scan for that, look at where the ancient lake basins and river systems might have been in the Sahara, and to look there, because if there was a civilization that existed during that period, then they wouldn't have just been limited to the Nile Valley. I think it would have been all over that part of northern Africa.
We think that the Tower of Babel should actually have been in Mesopotamia, but there is no proof that it was there. They never found it. And actually, it should be in the land of Cush, because that's how it's described in the Bible. And it should be next to the river Gihon. Well, Josephus, Fra Mauro map of 1457, Josephus the scholar, as well as Herodotus, all said that the Nile was the river Gihon. Ben Kerkwyk, Van Kerkwyk.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Van just means like from.
Yeah, it's the clan of, apparently, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like from or of. It's like von in German or van in Dutch.
Yes.
So I guess you're basically coming from the Netherlands at some point in time in your history.
Yeah, from the church. In fact, that's what it means.
The what? Sorry.
Kerkwyk, Kerkwyk is church, so it actually means like family of the church.
Okay, well, yeah. I've learned something, which is interesting, because right now it's 2:22, so we're already starting off with the synchronicity on related to church, from the church. Interesting. Well, Ben, it is such a pleasure to have you here on Think Tank. I was really blown away by the stuff you presented at the CPAK conference on vases that you had analyzed to super high precision levels that really showed that there's no way we could have made these granite vases in this day and age today, and yet they all came out of Egypt. So
indeed, yeah.
It's fascinating to me. And now you're telling me as well, just before getting onto this, that that there might be some connection also to music and musical scales, which is also potentially connected to my research on the pyramids.
Yeah, it was something I discovered after meeting you at CPAK. It was I really enjoyed that conference. I mean, Graham was there. I mean, it was a great time. I loved your presentation as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there is the background to this is that there's always been this interesting class of artifacts, if you like, that come from ancient Egypt, and it's these hard stone vessels. These vases, plates, dishes, they're these just remarkable category of artifacts. And a lot of these, it's interesting, most people think of them as coming from it's the ancient Egyptians who made them, but a whole heap of them, in fact, probably most of them actually trace back to pre-dynastic time, so that they're even older than the dynastic civilization itself. Many of them were found in the Nakata cultures, and even on sites that go back as far as 14,500 years, 12,000 years. So they're quite remarkable, and people have always looked at them and thought, well, these are really interesting. They look very precise. You see some of them are just balanced as if they look like they're standing on the tip of an egg. They're so well made, and made from amazingly hard types of stone, granite, diorite, porphyry, schist, even stones with a high amount of corundum in them. There are examples like that. Guys like John Anthony West have always been interested in them. And in fact, in his series, Magical Egypt, there's a clip of him in the Egyptian Museum saying that he hopes at some point in the future, people will take a closer look at these and use modern technology to kind of peel back the layers, the onion layers, to see, what actually is, what makes them, like what's the geometric form of them, how precise are they? And that's kind of exactly what happened. I've been documenting the process. I can't take real credit for it. It's really been the work of Adam Young, as well as Chris Dunn's son, Alex Dunn. They were the guys who really drove this thing forward in the first place. Adam had acquired one of these vessels or vase on the private antiquities market, and had it scanned using structured light scanning, which gives you a resolution down to about 1,000th of an inch. And then that the scan results been analyzed in, GD&T, or geometric distancing and tolerancing software, to really define like how precise is this, how flat are the surfaces, what's the concentricity, what's the roundness, what's the precision of the relative components of the vase to each other, because it's like an oblate artifact. You can't just look at it and say, well, how precise is it? You have to match areas of the vessel to geometric shapes that then you can perform basic geometry on. Like, look at, okay, where's the center point of the sphere, where's the center line of the cylinder that matches the shape, the cone or whatever it is. And the results that came back were kind of really mind-blowing. Like, you're talking about precision within 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch, 3 or 4, that type of thing. So the sort of precision that we get in modern machining for stuff that's done for like the aerospace industry, people making parts for jet engines, for example, that's the type of precision we're talking about. The precise parts of motors, things like that. We're in that range, and it's I think a real challenge to assume or to suggest that this type of precision can be achieved by hand in material like granite or diorite. Right? These aren't homogeneous materials, apart from being extremely hard. This isn't the type of stone you'd really want to work in if you were sculpting stone. Most people use marble or alabaster or something that's much softer.
Did you know that there's a new love affair with mathematics and geometry happening all around the world today? People who once despised these subjects in high school are now finding they're falling in love with them. Do you know why? Because math without meaning is simply information, whereas math with meaning is divine communication. My courses, The Etymology of Number and The Language of Light, guide you on a journey of self-discovery, sharpening your problem solving and pattern perceiving, as well as analytical and creative thinking, and unlocking your fullest polymathic potential. And most importantly, acquainting you with the mathematical language of the universe itself. You will never see the U inverse the same again. To get started, I recommend The Etymology of Number, a 4-part series that explores the evolution of numbers and their impact on fields like physics, chemistry, music, and art. It is the embodiment of Leonardo da Vinci's encouragement to study the science of art and the art of science. Learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. My second course series, The Language of Light, is a 6-part series that builds on concepts from the first course and offers deeper insights into unified sciences, ancient wisdom, spirituality, and their relevance to today. My courses are always fun and easy to understand. They intertwine mathematics, music, art, and consciousness, and illuminate the mathematical connections that span all disciplines of science and art. Register for these 2 courses, Etymology of Number and The Language of Light, at robertedwardgrant.com under the Courses tab. And join the Robert Edward Grant community chat on Orion Messenger for lively, engaging, and innovative discourse.
Yeah. They're also not homogeneous, right? They're conglomerates of different minerals. You have hornblende, mica, quartz, silica, things like that vary in hardness around them. Yet the results we see in these vessels are just really remarkable. So that was kind of the first step in this vase project, just trying to define the precision that we see on these vessels.
Wow. So that, I tell you, I was just blown away at the level of precision. It was reminding me of much larger structures like, we see in Saqqara, where there's these perfect 90-degree angles. And how exactly would you do that with granite? Right. Across the board, and these really super polished surfaces and everything. Mm-hmm. And it was like that level of precision down to like microns of accuracy.
Yeah. And in fact, so what's happened since that first vase kind of got scanned and analyzed is that other people have come out. As a guy named Matt Bell. He's become a good friend of mine. He started up his own podcast, but he's a well-set individual, and he actually, on the back of these initial vase videos, went out and started acquiring vases on the antiquities market. And he's since acquired a few dozen of these things, and he's been very willing to have them scanned and analyzed. And he has some just absolutely spectacular examples. And a lot of these other vessels, and even the original vessel, the one we started with, have now also been scanned in CT X-ray machines, which does give you resolution down to a micron.
Wow.
You also get the inside with the CT X-ray. You get the inside of the vessel as well. Structured light just scans the outside. So, and the analysis that's come out of a lot of these other vessels, we've learned a few things. One is that, okay, the first example, the first one we looked at, one of the open questions was, well, is this thing a unicorn? Like, is this the only one that's this precise?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that no, not even close. Many of these other vessels are also in the same realm in terms of precision. Some of them even better. And not only that, but there was this is the power, I think, of kind of crowdsourcing or open sourcing this material, because Adam Young, who really owned the scan results of the first vessel, he was willing to like share that with everyone. So we shared that. I put it on my website and people can freely download. You can still get it today from there. There's an STL file. You can download the model and do analysis on it. And there was actually a Danish cryptographer, Mark Vist is his name. He runs an excellent website called unsigned.io. And he took this vessel and he started analyzing it from like a geometric and mathematical perspective. And one of the things, so he basically reverse engineered the design behind the vessel. And it turns out that, these aren't just the creation of some craftsman who's, working on it and deciding he's going to make a pretty looking vase. There's a lot of design elements that go into this. And one of the things he discovered, and I think this is probably the most significant part of all of this, is that he found that all of the components of the vase. So if you look at the shapes and the curvature on this vessel, it's like obviously the circle is kind of the most widely used primitive geometric shape in it. You can match the curvature of different parts of the vases to like an arc of a circle, and of course you can measure the diameter and radii of that circle. So when he did that, he discovered that there's a fixed ratio relationship between the different circles that make up the curvatures of this vessel. And that fixed ratio relationship can be defined with a single kind of scalar function that he termed the radial traversal pattern. And it's basically radius of circle size n equals the square root of 6 over 2 to the power of n. And you can step that up and down to like -1, -2, or, +1, +2, +3, +4. And it turns out that all of these circles that make up the shapes and the form of this vase fit that pattern. So it's like these aren't random sized curves. These are all made from circles that match this one function. And there's 12 or 13 of them. So you basically have a degree of mathematical interrelationship, 12 levels of it or 13 levels of it with all of these different circles. And you can design the vase mathematically just using this function. And he did exactly that. So he went into CAD and he said, all right, so we've got this radial traversal pattern. I'm going to design a vase using purely the maths. I'm just going to create the vase from the mathematics. So he creates his vase model in CAD, and then he compares it to the scan of the original vase. So this nice high resolution STL of the original vase. And this is kind of mind-blowing. It speaks to the precision of it. But he found that when you compare them, the median radial deviation of those circles is about 6 microns. So from the mathematical model to the scan of the original thing, it's the median radial deviation is 6 microns. So at that level, you don't know if you're dealing with inaccuracies in the scan, or maybe it's a little bit of surface damage, because these things are at least 5,000 years old, if not more. And just to
put this in perspective for everyone, okay, imagine a vase that has a narrow top hole that is somehow burrowed out, and we don't know what kind of instruments could have been used to do this, and the entire thing is made from one piece of granite.
Yeah, or even harder types of stone.
So the vases have, different stone that they're made out of, dolerite, probably different compositions of granite, as well as, quartz, et cetera, mixtures. But it's fascinating, because what it's making me think of, Ben, is, have you tested to see what the resonance frequencies are for those vases?
Yes, yeah, that we have. I haven't released it yet. I do have some video where we actually got a tone generator and ran it on the vase, on the vessels, and you can tell when it's resonating. Those are still results we're kind of putting together. I think they need to be documented a little more yet. Obviously, you get different resonant frequencies in different ones, because that's the other thing about these vessels. I mean, some of them, you literally have them the size of the end of your thumb, right up to big vessels that stand up to about hip height. So there's, and there's tens of thousands of them. They found at least 40 to 50,000 of them beneath the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. And
which, by the way, underneath the step pyramid at Djoser and Saqqara is there's like a whole city under there.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, I've been down super, super deep, and then I still looked down. I could see I was down. I had my watch that like tells you what, how far underground you are.
Yeah.
And it was 137 feet, and I could still see hundreds of feet of this city that was literally built underneath that pyramid.
Yeah, well, we know underneath there's at least 5 or 6 miles of tunnels and chambers, and I've been down there several times myself. You can find fragments of these vessels. It's fascinating going. It's a special permission thing to get down there.
Yeah,
great
I've
chance to
gotten that too.
Yeah, go with Robert or come with me. Or I always make sure it's on my tours. I think it's a real adventure getting down there. There's some parts you got to call through.
Ben is definitely another adventurer. He's after my own heart for sure. And I've watched his videos and everything. He's got a great channel on YouTube that if you haven't learned about it yet, definitely go check it out. UnchartedX.
That's it.
And it's got phenomenal information on there. And, as soon as I met him, I was like, okay, this is a guy I definitely want to stay close to because he's on the cutting edge of finding things like so many of us are as well. But he's got a nice platform and really takes a thoughtful approach to how to convey the information.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I appreciate that. I try to take a scientific approach to it. I mean, my background is in science, so I try to take that approach to it and look at the evidence and where it leads. And I have a technical bent on a lot of this, so I look at it from an engineering perspective. A lot of this stuff you find people like Chris Dunn. And it's other engineers. Typically, those are the people outside of the field of archaeology that take a significant interest in things like machining and precision. It's not typically something that's in an archaeologist's wheelhouse, and that's not a criticism. That's just the nature of what they do is a little bit different.
Absolutely.
To what, say, an engineer or a stonemason might see when they're on these sites. But yeah, there's a lot to it. There's these vessels, just to round that out, because here's the kind of the even more mind-bending thing that we found as this sort of open source investigation continued with a number of other people getting involved in it, is once we started scanning other vessels, other vases, here's the crazy thing, is that we discovered that there are other vessels that also have that exact same radial traversal pattern in their design. So there's at least 3 or 4 that have been analyzed. You have to go to there's a bit of work involved in actually analyzing those ratios between the curvatures on the vessels and things. But we found that there are now 3 or 4 of them where pretty much all of the curvatures on them, the circles match that same fixed ratio relationship that we saw on the initial vase, which sort of it tells me that, okay, these things, they were designed. They had to have been designed with some sort of system in mind, and then executed with this remarkable precision to that design, and you get this end product. The connection to your work came after I had met you, in that I was talking about the radial traversal pattern, and I hadn't looked at it from this angle, but so I actually got it in a comment on one of the videos, and then I followed it up. But it turns out that this fixed ratio, this radial traversal pattern, seems to also match the harmonic scale.
Interesting.
Which is, I know that what you found at
fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fascinating from the perspective that we might be looking at a system of mathematics or a system of design that may have been used in not only the largest artifacts from the ancient world in terms of the pyramids, but also in some of the smallest, the most precise.
It's interesting because I'm just getting visions, I would say, to a certain extent, and seeing, especially there in Saqqara, where sound is such a big part of that entire complex.
It is.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, well, it was always thought to have been like the Sufi legends and the stories behind it. Like it was a sound hospital, right? It was a place of healing.
It's a sound hospital, exactly. It's Imhotep. It's definitely this very powerful sound, scalar wave kind of healing center. and where you put your head into certain of the crevices, and you basically find the exact right frequency, and then that will resonate that little area where you basically put your head into it. What I'm thinking is that maybe each of these vases had what I'm seeing is that they would have different liquids like water infused. Some water was infused with certain different things, like blue lotus, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
and that they could actually entrain the water by the resonance frequency of that vase, and it would be set to a particular healing for a particular ailment. It's almost like they would use the water that would go inside the vase as a means for a medication.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm something I'm convinced of with these vessels and vases is that they were functional. I don't think you make things that precisely
And not
unless
that
you're
many, too.
and not that many, yeah, unless you're chasing something a functional return. I mean, there is an absolute relationship between precision and function. You only develop precision in order to get some sort of functional return. That's how it works in the modern world. That's how precision came about in the pursuit of naval cannons that shot straight and accurate timepieces, so we could measure longitude, things like that. And it's progressed to today's world where it's literally nanometer processors to pack millions of transistors onto a single little integrated circuit. And you're not doing that for fun. It costs billions of dollars to do it, but it's done for a functional return. So I think the aspect, because we see precision in things like boxes and vessels, to me, it screams that there was some sort of function to them. I think there's some other indications of potential function on these vases and vessels as well, in the shape of the lug handles that are on a lot of them. Some, not all of them have lug handles, but some do. And you'll find a lot of them, they're not very useful as lug handles. That they're sloped on the bottom. You couldn't really hold them very well by the lug handles. And to me, it almost looks like it's as if it's like a cam lock. You can imagine that thing being put in and twisted and locking
Yep.
into something. That's a potential indication of function. But I'm fairly convinced that these things had a function at some point and were then most likely inherited by the cultures that later inhabited that part of the world, the Nakata cultures and
Yeah.
then the dynastic
Hmm.
Egyptians. They're intrinsically valuable if you're in the business of making pottery vessels and things like that. You find a hard stone vessel, you're going to know that, okay, this is something remarkable. It becomes valuable. It filters up through the social structure to the top layers of it, gets buried with people as treasures and things to take to the afterlife. And that's what we see happening. And this is why, I think these vessels are kind of a smoking gun to something more significantly advanced going on in very ancient times, in that a lot of these are pre-dynastic. We know they've been around
Yeah.
since before the dynastic Egyptian civilization started. And then they kind of die out in that very early part in the Old Kingdom, like third, fourth dynasty. They've all pretty much been taken and buried with kings. Even Josiah himself, the third dynasty pharaoh, where he was buried with 40 to 50,000 of them at least. A lot of those, even in the museum there at Saqqara, they tell you that these were probably inherited heirlooms from earlier times, because they have primitively scratched hieroglyphs on them that name people that lived before him. And after those times, though, these things sort of disappear from the archaeological record. The whole process of vase making and vessel making switches over to alabaster, which is a much softer stone.
Yeah.
And these alabaster vessels, as
And it's
beautiful as they are,
translucent, too.
yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
thin, and then but these alabaster vessels, they're not precise, they're not symmetric. They're definitely made by hand. They still make them out there at Luxor today in the same methods that are shown by the scenes on the walls that they found at Saqqara. Of apparently, this was a technique that Imhotep came up with, where they would get a bent stick with a flint tip and weights on the side of it, and they'd spin that in order to try to core it out, and then they're polishing them and rubbing them by hand. It's a whole different level of technology and sophistication to the hardstone vessels, which are older. So to me, that's like, okay, this is imitation. This is reverence for the things they've found. And yeah, you speak about translucent stone. That's another aspect of some of these vases. I mean, some of them are
Yeah.
remarkably thin. Like one couple of the ones we've scanned have wall thicknesses down to about 2 millimeters, and it's translucent
Wow.
diorite. Literally, the light goes
How do
through
you
the
get
granite and
that
diorite.
right? It's like,
Yeah,
wow. And
yeah.
one of the things I looked up recently was that a lot of people think that granite is 55% quartz crystal, and
It
I had thought
varies.
that for the longest time. And actually, I found that the composition of silicon dioxide in granite is actually between 72 and 77%.
Yeah.
So it's very, very high. So you're basically talking about predominantly a crystal bowl or a crystal vase.
Yeah.
When you've basically got it down to that kind of thinness, it's just absolutely incredible. So what do you think they might have been used for?
Well, it's fun to speculate. I think they were probably components of a larger system. And I mean, I think resonators is a potential use for them in some ways. I mean, I know like I'm a fan of like Chris Dunn's theories around the Giza power plant, and one of the core parts of what he talks about in that system is the Grand Gallery being filled with these Helmholtz resonators, which are basically resonators of various sizes. I don't really know what they might have been used for. There's between the vessels and this sort of phenomena of these underground single piece stone boxes that seem to be either in pyramids or in deep under the ground and sort of anchored to the ground. I definitely think there was something functional going on. I don't really know what it is. I think it's only time and more investigation that's done with an open-minded approach is going to give us a few more clues to get there. I don't think simply just stating that, well, the ancient Egyptians, we know what they used. They used dolerite pounding stones and flint and copper chisels. So that's how all of this was made. Case closed. I don't think that's very helpful. I think there's plenty of evidence that suggests that, okay, these are far more sophisticated than that. I mean, we have tool marks for much more sophisticated tools than that as well. And just ignoring it and saying that, well, no, the dynastic Egyptians did it all, and because we know what tools they used, that's the end of it. I don't think that's going to help us. I think it's really only an open-minded approach to like, okay, let's try and replicate these things. Let's explore all of these ideas about what their potential function could be. Let's find out what their resonant frequencies are, the volumes are, increase the data set so that we can do some more just analysis across a broader range of examples. I think that's going to help us. Where we are talking with museums, the ultimate goal is to get into museums to scan some of their artifacts. There is work underway in the VASCAN project to make that happen in Egypt. So there's an Egyptian university who already has access to a museum and their pieces, who is interested in using structured light scanners and getting access to scan all of those things and doing the analysis behind it. So the wheels are slowly turning on that stuff, but I think it's only when we apply ourselves and try and figure out a bit more that we might get to some of the actual functions. But I don't really know what they might have been used for.
Well, you mentioned Imhotep, and I mentioned him as well.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Imhotep? And he seemed to be one person during the dynastic period that really had some connection to maybe something pre-dynastic.
It seems like it. I mean, for sure. I mean, the guy's a polymath, right? I mean, genius designer. I mean, he's not just the villain from the Mummy films that people might recognize the name.
No.
Worked for Djoser. He was venerated throughout the history of the dynastic Egyptian civilization. They were talking about him thousands of years later and still worshipping him or creating shrines to him. He came up, I mean, he supposedly designed the step pyramid, and he, came up with these ways, I think, of replicating some of these vessels. Yeah, it does seem like he might have had a connection to pre-dynastic times in the builder culture. I mean, the Egyptian culture themselves say they have a connection to it, right? They talk about their own history, Zep-Tepi, the Shemsu Hor, 36,000 years of history before the first dynasty ever started that, we arbitrarily decide is just myth and legend, but they called their own history. So there's, interestingly enough, also there is a bit of evidence that suggests there were particular sects and I guess religious cults within ancient Egypt that may have had access to some of this knowledge. This might explain some of the alignments and astronomical phenomena that we see embedded in some of the Egyptian architecture. Manu Seyfezada wrote an interesting book called Beneath the Sphinx.
Yeah, I know Manu well.
Yeah, so I like his theory, that idea that there was, this hall of records that stored some of this information. There's some evidence that suggests that it might have actually been the Old Kingdom Egyptians who first got in there, found some of that knowledge, didn't really have the capability or technological ability to utilize it, but they were replicating it and repeating it, so writing it down and using it symbolically. And we see that with the some of the headstones and some of the evidence that's left. It gives us astronomical knowledge, things like orbits of planets and relative distances apart, things like that he's discovered. I think that's interesting. It does seem like there's a thread of that knowledge that may have gone through that culture, and certainly Imhotep seems like a guy that might have had access to it because he was innovating back then in the Third Dynasty.
Mm-hmm. So when you saw the presentation that I gave at CPAK on the connection between musical intervals and the pyramid slope angles,
yep.
Was there anything that came to mind for you that was maybe made you think of something else, or because at that time you hadn't made the connection yet with the vases?
No,
but what was your feeling in hearing that?
I mean, it was, I guess, another sort of confirmation that there is a degree of intelligent design that has a system behind it that goes into making these things. I did also notice and think about a connection to South America. There is a little known, I don't know if you've been there, but there's a place called Napa Huaca, also called Napa Inglesia, that's in the Sacred Valley.
I haven't been there, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a remarkable place. It's like this, it's a bluestone outcropping, basically a granite outcropping on this hill where there's this cave that's been carved, and there's this big monolithic like angled windows that are in there, and this whole cave's been manufactured. And one of the funny things about this cave is that the slope angle of that cave is, I think it's exactly the same as the middle pyramid at Giza. It's exactly the same angle.
53.13 degrees?
I think so.
It would be the 3-4-5 triangle then.
Yeah. So, I think it's, you obviously have the similarities in terms of megalithic construction between places like Egypt and South America. Yes. To me, it's you've been there, I've been there many times as well. It's clear as day once you see it that there are different styles of construction stacked up on top of each other. In South America, in the Sacred Valley in particular. And obviously
the Valley Temple in Giza, the way it's built with its granite construction looks very similar to Sacsayhuaman or sections of Cusco.
Yeah, the Coricancha. I mean, you
absolutely
it's the same thing. I mean, you even see there's tubular drills, there's tool marks,
notches and everything.
Yeah, the same window shapes, the same trapezoidal
Japan
shapes.
Also,
yeah,
Japan has the same thing. Section of Malta could be compared to that as well.
Yep,
it's a style that we see literally all over the world.
Yeah, there's a place called Zanaki Tepe in Turkey. It's fairly in a remote area. It's another site that's been uncovered. It shows the same sort of megalithic polygonal stonework, very similar to what you see in Egypt and South America. So I and now see things like slope angles, and I know there's a significance attached to those slope angles that you've discovered that's really interesting to me. So I do think we're just looking at more evidence for this idea that there was a culture that predated the known ones that was evidently wiped out in Cataclysm, which is the story that is told to us through pretty much every culture around the world, that was here on this planet at some point, that had reached this significant heights. They were executing in stone and building things for whatever purpose. I'm not sure, but they were clearly doing stuff and living a little bit differently to how we do today, but they seem to have existed all around the world, and you see echoes of it being transmitted to us through all of these different ancient cultures that then later inherited and renovated their sites. I think Egypt and the dynastic civilization had a real connection to them. They talk about it. I actually think that they probably inherited the cultural iconography from them, the look of dynastic Egyptians, like these massive statues. You have statues of that classic Egyptian shape that are 1,000 tons or more. I mean, there's several of them in Egypt. So they had a connection to them. I think it's a little bit different in places like Peru, where, you have this big gap in time. Like whatever culture was there, it was wiped out. I mean, that place was also very severely impacted by the Younger Dryas event. 85%, I think, of megafauna in South America at the time went extinct. So it was traumatic. I mean, I don't know if that's the cataclysm that affected any precursor civilization. It could have been prior ones. But there's a gap in time because the Inca come in and the Inca that they attribute everything to there don't have that connection to this culture. But we certainly do see it in places like Egypt. So yeah,
it's the same thing though. We see that the Inca clearly built on top of what was a much earlier civilization's work at Ollantaytambo. It's very clear.
Yeah,
you see it also at Machu Picchu.
Yep.
It's the size of the blocks that really makes the big difference. It's like there are 9 pyramids and actually 11 pyramids if you include the Abu Rawash pyramids that had large block constructions in Egypt. And those are the ones that I believe are actually the most ancient. I think that there's one that's probably kind of in between that was probably rebuilt, possibly, under the rubble of something that was already there. But this was, or rather on top of, this would be Saqqara. And, Saqqara has the feel of being a very, very old place. And when you look at the sarcophagus in Saqqara at the bottom of that huge, like almost like well-looking structure where you look up, you're like, whoa, we're inside the pyramid. And this thing is just massive. And looking down on the rose granite in that, that makes you feel like the pre-dynastic, pyramids that have the large block constructions. And we are told that the step pyramid is the oldest, and actually, I don't believe that. It may have in fact been one of the oldest, but then was built on top of with the current small, brick construction. It's not even symmetrical.
Sorry, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I also think that the step pyramid was the work of the dynastic Egyptians and Imhotep. I mean, he was the guy who came up with it.
I think he rebuilt it.
Yeah.
Right? Probably.
Well, I think he either rebuilt it or he built it on top of that pre-existing subterranean infrastructure.
Like a big like a super invasive renovation project.
Yeah. I mean, have you been in the southern shaft at Saqqara?
Yes, I have.
So it's basically a carbon copy of what is beneath the step pyramid. And then there's another giant shaft over there near the Winis pyramid that looks like it's got a big box down there. It hasn't fully been uncovered. So you see the same thing. It's weird that like it's like the exact same thing that's beneath that. The step pyramid is also in the southern shaft. It's a giant, big 100-foot, massive 40-foot wide shaft with this multi-piece granite box that's made from megalithic stone at the bottom. And yeah, the step pyramid is, to me, it's pretty clear. Like, again, much like the vessels, the alabaster vessels are imitation of the hardstone vases. I think they may well have undertook that project to build that step pyramid as imitation of the other pyramids that were likely there already. They're looking at them. Obviously, it's the work of the gods. We're going to try and imitate it and do what we can. And yeah, the step pyramid's built with smaller blocks. It was also expanded. It's the only pyramid that doesn't have a square base. Like it's actually a little bit longer than it is wide.
Yeah.
It was
there were same with Mexico periods. Though. I mean, we have that at the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico as well. But one of the things I noticed, going to Mexico and to Latin America, was I started measuring the slope angles of all the pyramids. And guess what? They follow the same scale.
Really?
Yep. I just went to Mexico not long ago. I measured at Chichen Itza. I measured at Ekbalam. I measured at, several of in Cozumel, at Tulum, and all the structures. And they were all falling exactly within the same 24-note scale.
Wow.
Which is fascinating.
It is.
And, it's like, how could they all be so perfect? And then you look at Mexico City and Teotihuacan, which is really Tehuti-Huacan. And Tehuti, for those that don't know, is just another name for Thoth.
Huh.
But
it is.
Interestingly, when you look at the height of the Pyramid of the Sun, which is the highest one there, it's 216 feet. That's the exact same height as Menkaure Pyramid. When you look at the base width, it's irregular, but the base width of two of the sides is 756 feet, which is exactly the same base width as the Great Pyramid. And then we look at the base width of the Pyramid of the Moon, and it's 481 feet. That's exactly the height of the Great Pyramid. So it's like these are clearly resonant structures that are following this knowledge and understanding of this, maybe an understanding of scalar technology that we don't have a clue about today.
It's like a design, like a methodology that's behind it, and something you said before we were talking that struck me as an interesting connection is that this seems to also relate to, astronomical phenomena, the precession of the equinoxes. If this,
Yeah.
so it's like, I don't know if there's a basis for it, because it's I see another connection, there's been another connection's been discovered to kind of what I would term these, I guess, like a universal constant, the phi, like the golden ratio.
Golden ratio.
Also pi. I mean, we see these significant ratios encoded deeply into things like the vases, but that's one of the other outcomes of this analysis, of these vessels. The geometric analysis of it is that we find a lot of measurements actually encode the golden ratio as well as pi. In fact, they have a relationship to each other. You can have pi over phi squared, and there's a
4 over pi.
Yep, there's
and
a
phi squared,
and there's a
phi,
whole
square root of phi rather.
Yeah, there's a whole list of these significant ratios that seem to be encoded into these vessels, which, according to traditional kind of history, I mean, no, they hadn't discovered pi, certainly not phi at the time or whatever, and the golden ratio, and these all predate those. And I always find the golden ratio to be an interesting one, given that it's basically the building blocks of reality. Like, it's from molecules and DNA up to the formation of galaxies. It's in everything that is expressed by nature. It's in the human body. It's in biology and everywhere else. And then you see it. There's almost a recognition of it. That's in terms of, like, we know about this. It's like this information that's being encoded in these artifacts and in these monuments that tells you something about the knowledge and capability of their creators. And it doesn't match up with what we know about with those civilizations.
I didn't really present this at the CPAK conference, but after the CPAK conference, we made a pretty significant discovery on our team, and I haven't, I've shared it on my podcast in conversations I've had with Randall Carlson, and also I've been an invited guest on several podcasts to talk about it. But basically, what we'd found was that we found there is an alpha omega that's on the rim of the sarcophagus. That is there. And, some people might think it's graffiti, but actually the alpha and omega symbols are the oldest symbols in Egypt as well. They represent the Apis, bull, and the Hathor. And the ancient name of the Great Pyramid, one of its names is Bull Mountain. So it's 2 chevrons and the Apis bull next to it. So
this is in the Great Pyramid?
The Great Pyramid.
This is the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid you're talking about?
On the sarcophagus rim in 2018,
okay,
I discovered that there's an alpha omega on the rim of the sarcophagus on the what would be the southwest side of the sarcophagus. And I can show you the video of it here in a second if you like. But basically that opened the door to finding things that maybe were hidden in plain sight that people didn't see before. Because now when you see the alpha omega, literally you can't miss it. It's like you're not going to miss it, right? It's like you can't unsee it after you see it. And so it's so obvious, in fact. And so you kind of go, wait a minute, what's really going on here? Right? Because we're how did we miss this? It's just not, it doesn't seem regular, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll find this photograph for you.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that you hadn't heard of that one yet.
I haven't. I might have. It's something's tweaking. I don't think I'd heard of it. I'm really interested. I mean, I've seen that box a lot. I'm interested in checking it out.
Here we go. All right. So you see this right here.
Yeah.
And the way that I'd seen it, and it's strange because I found alpha omega on every sarcophagus in Saqqara as well, underneath the hieroglyphics. And I actually recorded it. So there's literally, and it's not Greek from the standpoint that we think it is. I believe the Greeks got this writing from a much older civilization.
Right.
And so the way that I saw it, I mean, I knew all week I was going to discover something. I went there in 2018. And the way that I actually saw it was I had been drawing Alpha Omega in my notebook every day for a week. And then I went there and I was in the Great Pyramid with 12 of my friends. One of them was laying in the sarcophagus, and I had this like flashback of memory that there was an Alpha Omega on the rim of the sarcophagus. And exactly where I remembered seeing it being pressed into the rose granite, I then looked, and I was now in that regular time dimension. I looked at the exact same spot, and there it was.
Wow.
And this is what it looks like.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm going to definitely be looking for this next time I'm there. Of course, the lighting in this room is always so terrible. It's so hard to see the detail. Oh, I see. I do. Exactly.
The light on the
behind
side.
it.
You can't see it.
I do see it.
You cannot see it unless you put the light on the side.
Wow.
If you put direct light, you will not see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a similar thing to that box has the markings of tubular drills in it as well, like on the insides. And you have to look at the light.
But if you look at this.
Yeah,
right,
it's
right
clear.
Here also, you see this little thing that looks like a V shape.
Yep.
Right. It's actually when you look closer at the photographs of it that we have, it's like a circle with a compass inside of it. And there's like 5-degree markings inside of it, which is wild. So you've got the alpha right here.
Yep.
And the omega right here.
Yep. So
it's like, whoa, what is up with that?
Yeah.
So I analyzed it and found that. So the room is 31.4159 meters in perimeter, the King's Chamber.
Right.
Which is pi times 10.
Yeah.
And this is exactly 5.605 inches in width, which is the square root of pi times 10 in inches.
Huh.
So this is like wild, right? It's like,
it is. Yeah.
What the heck? So this is a better photo of it. You can see the omega pretty clear in this one.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. It does not look like graffiti, and it's done with exacting accuracy. And it also is giving us very detailed information about mathematical constants.
Indeed.
So basically, this is the
triangle.
The one I was just talking about, the compass. You can see you can even see the little dots, right?
Yep.
In between that are etched. It's like a compass and a circle around it. So it's right here.
Yeah, I know exactly. I know. I'm definitely going to take a look at that area next time I'm there. It's that's super interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, and so what's interesting about the room is that the sarcophagus will fit 6 times to the ceiling and 5 times wall to wall. Right. And so if you look at the volume, how many times will the sarcophagus fit inside the King's Chamber? It's 137 times, which is alpha. The fine structure constant is called alpha constant. And I mean, that's kind of wild, right?
Yes. Yep.
That's kind of very wild. And so you start to think about this. It's like, what is, what could this mean? And what is this, right? Well, then what we discovered next was that the walls are covered in petroglyphs that people had not seen. And we now know what those petroglyphs are. They're actually Zodiac signs. So it's like a giant dendera plate. Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It's like, I've got to take you through this at some stage because
yes, I would love that.
It is mind blowing. Yeah. Because basically what you find is that the whole thing is showing us the precession of equinox on the walls in the King's Chamber.
Wow.
And I'll show you some of the photographs of it just so you can get a taste of it. And then we can have another, conversation about that. But it's super, super fascinating. And it was actually, Susie, who was on the trip with us, and she basically discovered the bull on the wall. Now, we found alpha omegas on all the sarcophagus that's in the Khafre pyramid as well. Mm-hmm. And we even found it on the bench in the Menkaure pyramid. Alpha Chi Omega.
Yep.
on the back, right? And it's like on all of them, which is like fascinating.
Well, hopefully we
And I'm going
find
to show
that.
you some.
Hopefully we find that.
Sorry?
I was going to say, hopefully that we do find that Mankara box at some point that's sitting on the bottom of the Mediterranean somewhere, and we can take a look at
Exactly. I mean, that's probably going to be a tough order, right,
it.
to
Yeah.
get. But I'll show you this as well. This is in the Queen's chamber, and I had to kind of piece these together because the angles were not perfect. But let me share this with you. So this is the Queen's chamber. So look, there's a profile of a man right here. Here's his mouth. Here's his chin.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even see the vertebrae of his back. It's almost like it's x-rayed into the wall. You see the vertebrae and the tailbone right down here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
I
can
see
see
what
his
you mean.
mouth. And so if I zoom in on this,
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah. There's your nose, chin.
it almost looks like you can see his teeth and everything like an x-ray.
Yeah.
You see his nose and his mouth right here, and his chin right here.
Is that
It's a profile.
Is it raised up, or is it just a coloration? Do you know if it's
No,
like
it's like an etching.
an etching? Okay.
Yeah, it's like an etching. So, and then here's his like, this looks like the thalamus right here.
Yep.
So like a third eye type of thing. And you could see like the teeth, even down to the molar. Look, there's a molar right here.
Yeah, it does. That's what it looks like.
What in the heck? And I had Egyptologists in there with me, and they're like, I could see it too. And they're like, but I'm not supposed to see it.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, yeah, it's wild, right? So, so basically what we found though on this last trek, right after I talked at CPAK, was that, first of all, are you familiar with the deacon of astrology?
No.
So the deacon would be the Egyptian method for, the way they looked at the zodiac. So you have the 12 zodiac signs.
Right.
But then in addition to that, you actually have 3 for each sign that are representative of the other Ptolemaic zodiac, or rather the constellations, right?
Right.
So for example, inside of Capricorn is Delphinus, Aquila, and Sagitta.
Right.
And inside of Aquarius is Piscis Austrinus, Pegasus, and Cygnus, right? And inside of Taurus is Orion, Eridanus, and Auriga.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these are all part of it. The same, it's like a more specific zodiac. You can think of it like that.
Yeah.
And so this is what they look like, right? And what we noticed was that all the ones in the sky were matching the ones on the wall in exactly the right places. And I'll show you those in just a moment. So as it goes around, you'll see here's one right here. There's actually here a bull right underneath.
I see it. Yeah.
You can see the shape of the bull and its horns.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got something over its like what would be its heart. But there's also a cow here that's a Hathor. And the larger cow is like a mother. And you can even see it's got hoofs. Look, the hoofs are right here. And here's the face. Here are the horns of the cow.
Yep.
Here's the eye. Here's
face.
The snout. Here's the neck.
Yep.
Right? And then it's got the bull, the Apis bull, that sacrifices itself for its mother, ultimately. Right? And then you see something else right above it, which is a face. And this is all etched into the wall. So you could see it just like you could see here.
Yeah.
I've drawn it out so you can see it. The Taurus is over the throat of this face. And this face, I believe, to be the face of Orion. So because it's in Taurus. And so what we found after we started looking at this, and you can see here a pupil right here. You can see a pupil right here.
Yep.
You can see an eyebrow right here, another eyebrow right here, and a forehead, and a nose bridge, and nostrils here and here, and then even his lips right here. Are you seeing this for the first time?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've not seen this before, but I'm seeing it. What you're pointing out.
Is this kind of mind blowing or what?
Well, it is. Yeah, I mean, particularly if they line up, as I'm seeing that image there, which looks of the king's chamber, showing the different
Yeah.
dots on
And
it.
here's the bull. See the horn here, other one here. It's the Apis bull, and it actually has this shape of an diamond and then an inverted diamond. There's a line right here you can see on it too, coming down on both sides. And this represents Orion, the shape of the constellation itself.
Right.
And Orion is the Apis bull. So it's like, I mean, that's just amazing. And then above, in the same place of the eyes, over the eyes is actually also a bird. You can see a bird right here with its wings going this way.
Yeah.
And this way, it's almost like a mask over his nose and eyes. And then there's another bird that looks like a Bennu that's right next to it. And
Yeah,
this represents Cygnus, and this is Lyra. Constellations, which are in the north sky, and this is the north wall.
Right. So they're in the right place.
So we started to see that all of this was actually matching what we were finding on the wall. So then I went to Mexico, I measured all the pyramids there. And then basically I found from this thing I did on Da Vinci that, and it's on my show Codex, that I predicted where the next chamber would be. And then Jean-Pierre Houdin confirmed exactly where I said the next chamber would be, which is right at the throat chakra line, right here with the new Grand Gallery going up to it.
Right.
And this is from the Muon and ground penetrating radar scans.
Yeah.
But what's more interesting, in my view, is that all of these walls have, there's Leo. So you can see a lion's head on this wall, which is the western wall.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an eye. Here's the other eye. There's a nose. Looks like a big lion head right there,
just thinking, no wonder they keep this place in the dark. Like the lighting in there is generally so terrible that it's
terrible.
It's tough to see anything. So,
but you know what helped me?
Cool.
What helped me is I actually got LiDAR scans of the whole thing.
Oh, really? Yeah, that would definitely be able to do that. Yeah.
So I got LiDAR scans of the entire thing that Harvard University did. And then I was able to piece them together into a 3-dimensional mapping, which I have to show you, that is in a environment we call Maya, and it's all on Apple Vision Pro. So I can walk in the King's Chamber now anytime. I can go in all the chambers inside the Great Pyramid anytime.
Right.
So here you can see the bull, same thing. But and now the Scan Pyramids project team is actually using lasers to confirm all of this as well, which is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So
if they can, I'd love to see a detailed map using the proper laser scanning.
And that's exactly what they're doing, which of course takes a lot of permission work and everything, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Right. So if we look at this is on the eastern wall. You can see the faint outline of something there, right?
Yeah, it looks like it.
So then using AI to pull the image out, you see that a woman on a horse.
I see that now.
Pegasus, actually, shooting an arrow at what looks like a big eagle up here with a wing coming across here. And then it turns out it perfectly matches the Zodiac and Delphinus shooting the Sagitta while riding the Pegasus at the Aquila. And then there should be a fish right to the upper left of the wing of the bird. And you can see a tail of a fish and a piscus, a Vesca piscus shape right here. So this is like starting to emerge. I presented this to Ashraf Mui, who is the director of the Giza Plateau, and he closed the pyramid actually during the daytime so I could present this to them. And he was pretty shocked.
Really? I could imagine.
When all of a sudden they could see it all, right? It was like, wow, what is going on? So we've now been able to map about 40 of the 48 constellations of the Ptolemaic period on the walls of the king's chamber.
That's amazing.
And the walls and the queen's chamber are also covered. Now you have to bear in mind, these walls have been scrubbed many times, even recently.
Yeah.
They've literally been scrubbed with harsh chemicals and everything. That's what leaves that weird white film, and they think they're cleaning the pyramid.
Yeah.
And they're like, really damaging what is left to be seen. But some of this stuff seems to be embedded within the atomic structure. So when you look at it from the side, you can actually see it and how the etching works into the wall, which is also very, very fascinating, right? And I'll try to find an image of that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's other indications that they were able to, it seems like, do things to this molecular structure almost of stone, like granite. You see it in the Serapeum on the boxes. They were able, there's like a polish, a layer it's almost like they had a liquid that would polish up and change give it this hard shell. It's not some sort of lacquer or anything like that. It's actually, you can see it on the inside of some of the boxes where this layer was applied, and even ran down the side of the box and the lids and formed these drip marks and things. And I've taken some microscopic pictures of that layer, and it's definitely like penetrated into the granite and done something to it, is what it seems like.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
absolutely.
It's basically alchemy, right? At some point, it seems like that's what's going on here.
So let me show you this. So this is actually Susie, when she discovered this.
Wow. I'm blown away.
So this was back in 2020.
Go ahead. Well, we just found something else here in the King's Chamber.
There's a hole here. Here's the base. Form body. And then something here.
Yeah, and so then from the side, we'll see here in just a second what it looks like.
Oh, yeah. Like that vitrified layer.
Yeah. And these are linear lines that shouldn't be there too on this, diamond shape or heart shape or whatever.
Yeah.
That's over, it's like, but we've found that literally all the walls are covered with designs like this. Literally covered. There's not a single space on the wall that is not covered with something.
That's fascinating.
This is on the sarcophagus right here. So I was presenting this to Muhammad Zakaria, and you could see a design here that looks like a yin yang almost right here, and then having like circles that go out and geometry that are giving us the straight lines. Another straight line here, and you'll see it.
So move the red light around a little bit.
You can see linear lines.
Yeah.
Right. You can see.
Is this on the inside or the outside of the box?
It's on the outside, right on the front side of the sarcophagus.
Right.
It looks like some sort of design that's geometric on there. There's also an eye on both sides of the sarcophagus that's etched into the granite as well. And this is becoming more and more known, right? I mean, you could see like an S shape right here. Almost looks like a yin yang. And then these lines coming off of it. And I don't think this is graffiti.
No,
because it's
yeah. I mean, you can tell the graffiti. There is hieroglyphic graffiti in lots of places, but this isn't that same technique at all.
No,
else.
And also we can see intention behind this too, because the intentionality can be found when we simply look at the shape of the room. Why is the King's Chamber shaped the way that it is?
Right.
Nobody can really know, but I will say this, that remember the pyramid complex, Menkaure was 5/4, Khafre is 4/3, and the Great Pyramid is 2/1 pi, right? And that's giving us all the perfect slope angles that we have. But then what's interesting is that the King's Chamber is 2/1.
Right, yeah, it's that double cube.
Yes, so we've got like the double cubed, it's not. It's a little bit different than a cube, because if you have a 2-to-1 rectangle and take the circumradius of that rectangle and then prop it up to make it the floor to ceiling height, that is what it will be. So instead of being, 10 cubits by 20 cubits and then by 10 cubits again to make a double cube, it's 11.18 cubits.
Okay.
Right. So that's the difference. So basically what that means is that, you've got close to a double cube, but it's not actually a double cube. And so that's part of the differential that we have there. But here's another view of that same face on the wall. Share that again.
Yeah, this is Queen's Chamber. Yeah, that's fascinating. I definitely be looking at this the next time I'm in there.
Yeah, and I'll send you all this stuff so that you can easily see it as well.
Have you seen the walls in the Winis pyramid chamber?
No.
So it's the pyramid texts, right? So it's all been plastered and it's been carved. But actually, if you take like in the chamber where there's a box in there, and there's all this writing on the walls. But if you actually shine a light on the side of the walls, you look at them like down the line of the wall, you can see there's actually shapes and figures also that pop out that use light to show it. It's like that, and then the writing has all been put over the top of that. But if you get a torch and you put it on the side of the wall, and you can see the heights, there's actually shapes and intention.
Oh, I got to go pay that place a visit.
Yeah, Winis's pyramid is fascinating. The pyramid texts alone are interesting, but the fact that there's an embedded and like large format shapes like this actually in the walls of that chamber. I do think that Winis's pyramid, that's megalithic as well, right? It's got casing stones that are 11 meters long, and it shows tremendous erosion, so it seems like it's very old. And it's got a bunch of megalithic granite in it, as well as a box. So yeah, check that out next time you're there. That's
I will definitely do that. And what you're describing is similar to this too. This is the DNA, north wall, right? The same wall where the bull and cow are. They're just over to the right, but you've got DNA literally right here, and it's in perspective drawing, which is super advanced.
Yeah.
So it's completely done in a way that looks 3-dimensional.
Indeed.
Which is a very unique mathematical technique that we only started using in the Renaissance period.
Right. And it's not something you typically see in Egyptian artwork.
No.
At all. So,
no, definitely not.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But this stuff is like, we found it literally, we found Alpha Omega all over. This is Caffrey. This one's harder to see, but you could see a faint outline because, again, these are so worn down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Of an alpha. It's basically this shape right here. And
you
could see it, and it looks like an eye over it as well. So it goes like this, and then this is the center of the eye, and there's an X coming down the center of it. So we also found that the bent pyramid, the red pyramids, all have like the same kinds of, they're not the same exactly, but they have petroglyphs etched into the walls.
The inner chambers, yeah.
Yeah, and Menkaure does as well. They all do. There's not one that doesn't, in fact. And we've just been missing all of this in the analysis. And no one's really been looking at it in this way.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. It's super fascinating. Here's another one. This is from Menkaure Pyramid.
You should definitely check out Lahoun as well. I think Lahoun has similarities to see if there's, like anything on those granite walls in that chamber would be interesting to see as well.
Absolutely. And what's interesting, if you look at this is Menkaure Pyramid. You know the room probably very well.
Yeah, the caduceus at the top there.
Right? It looks like a sword is here. This is a tree right here. And there's leaves and stuff coming down off of the tree. And then there's a sword here coming down. And then you can see the snakes going on both sides, literally a staff of caduceus and a sword. And then it looks as though there are hydra right here. You can see the faces of the Hydra. Here's one of them with an open mouth right here coming up.
And one over there.
I mean,
on the
it's
left,
faint, but when you start analyzing it really closely,
yeah.
there's a there. And this is matching the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, this would be a great application for, like you said, if these things get scanned with like a laser, like that sort of technology, and then we can tease this out in software. I think it's exactly what I was talking about before in terms of applying ourselves and our modern technology to try and learn a little bit more about the details of what's in these things, because it just isn't just some primitive symbolic tomb.
No, absolutely.
For a king.
No, and that's exactly what we are trying to do. But I know it is just not easy to be able to get all those kind of permissions and stuff, right? So this is basically the King's Chamber. Yeah. The 2-to-1 is doubling the octave. So in the musical scale, and the King's Chamber, then this implies that the King's Chamber is where you double your octave. So you've got the Zodiac going around the room, and then each of these are accompanied by the 3 that would be in the deacon of astrology, which is Egyptian the same as Zodiac. The Dendera Zodiac.
Yep. Yeah, of course, which is much later, at least in the Orthodox time frame.
But this is what one of the walls would look like. This is how I see it. Like it's literally covered.
Yeah.
The art style doesn't look anything like Egyptian stuff.
No, not at all.
Hi, I'm Robert Edward Grant. I invite you to explore my transformative books, Philomath and Polymath, each designed to expand your understanding of the world and ourselves. In Philomath, which means lover of learning, discover how mathematics weaves together physics, music, and prime number theory, revealing the universe's interconnected nature. It's more than a book, it's an enlightening voyage. Polymath builds on Philomath's insights, exploring the genius of thinkers like Pythagoras and Da Vinci, who used geometry to revolutionize science, art, and governance. Rediscover the polymathic roots that sparked past ages of enlightenment. Join me on this journey as well. Visit robertedwardgrant.com to get your copies today. Let's foster a new era of enlightenment and collaboration for a brighter future.
That's
it
fascinating.
Almost looks like a stylized Picasso or something.
Oh, but yeah, that's a good term, yeah.
The thing that I wanted to really point out, though, is maybe one reason for the room being the shape that it is that it's mirroring the 4 stars that are our North Star. So the North Star is Polaris today, but 6,000 years ago it was Thuban.
Yep.
And 6,000 years before that, it was Vega. And 6,000 years before that, it was Deneb.
Right.
So these stars would be in, Ursa, and of course, then Draco, then Lyra, and then finally Cygnus. And basically, every 6,000 years, we move to a different North Star location.
Yeah, based on precision.
And that creates in the North sky, when we look at it, a 2-to-1 rectangle, just like the King's Chamber.
Yeah.
Which, if you consider the Zodiac, you'd literally be going around inside that rectangle, right within the Zodiac, the deacon of astrology, and there it is. So, this is
it's fascinating.
Cygnus, right? Lyra. These are all the constellations that are in that exact spot on the north wall as well. So I wanted to share some of that with you just so you got a taste of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I am fascinated by it.
And I know you are. That's what I love about your work is you're so genuinely curious about this stuff, and then you go and chase it down and get into the details and stuff of it. But, I have not had any fights with the Egyptian government on this, not at all. In fact, they're just like stunned. They're like, how in the heck are you guys finding and seeing these things? And then the problem is once they see it, they can't unsee it.
Yeah, right. There's a number of things like that. That's good. I actually have some hope that, the new, administration of the Ministry of Antiquities are going to be a little bit more open about allowing, if not investigation, at least access into some of these places for people to do a bit of research. We'll see. I mean, I know Waziri got fired after the Menkaure pyramid debacle, but he was he was instrumental in opening up a lot of places for people to go see.
Yeah, I know. I definitely was a beneficiary, I guess, of being able to get access to certain things that I went on open dig sites with Waziri and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it is what it is. I was kind of surprised when they were starting to dig up Menkaure like that. With the Japanese delegation was working on it.
Yeah, they were still doing GPR testing. I saw on the side. I'm all for them digging up and exposing the base at some point, but I don't like the idea of them trying to reconstruct it because the concrete and everything will get involved. It's just not going to come together like it was. But I mean, that's one of those things I'd love to see them expose the base and the foundation around that pyramid. I mean, it's kind of blows my mind that hasn't been done. Same thing at the Red Pyramid, right? They literally built the staircase over the quarry rubble from what was being taken from it. I think, I'd love to see that uncovered, but I'm not so much a fan of trying to reconstruct it because it'll just never come back the same way.
I wonder if there's a way we could figure out with your vases based on the circumference versus the height or some relationship.
Yep.
Right, that must be embedded somehow in the structure of the vase that determines its resonance and its composition.
That would be an interesting analysis because we've definitely looked at, and this is like it's those types of measurements, like the radius of the foot and the radius of the opening and the widest part. That's where we see significant ratios being encoded in those measurements and significant numbers like phi and pi, but. Yeah, I once we collect that resonance data, that would be really interesting to run that through. Some of that process is actually being automated now. Once we get the significant measurements of the vases, we can tease out things like the radial traversal pattern as well as significant ratios with numbers like pi, and we'll see. But I'd love to get resonance added into that because I'm interested in that. Also, volume. That's another one that is part of these.
Volume,
there seems to
absolutely.
be some interesting data that's come out just from looking at the volume of these vases, trying to calculate that, which we're now getting because we're scanning with CT X-rays and getting the internal spaces.
It's like I was shocked when I kind of did the analysis on the slope angles and then found a very simple 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 relationship, on the pyramids, because we don't really learn that. We're taught that they're all built at very different time periods and they were not part of an overall plan. But actually, if you determine that you want to have a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 from the very beginning as the representation on the entire Giza Plateau, then that would predetermine the size and scale and the slope and everything of all three of the pyramids.
Right.
And to say that they just ended up that way seems kind of improbable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a similar vein to suggesting that, this is all of these numbers and these these fixed ratios are just accidents of design, or that you occasionally run into digits and things like the golden ratio, but it's like you having a 12 degrees of mathematical interrelationship in one single piece. It's not an accident. I mean, this is Mark Vist had a great quote. He said, "It'd be more likely to wake up one day and have an entirely new quantum universe sprouting out of your left nostril than it would for this to be an accident." So.
Totally. Well, if you ever want any perspective or additional help on looking at the vase phenomenon, from a mathematical perspective, I'd be more than happy to help you out in any way I could.
Thank you. I would love to do that. Yeah, I'll follow up with you and I'll get some of that, get the data across to you. Particularly once we get the resonance information in there, I think that would be. I'd love to get your take on it. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, so.
Well, I mean, part of the reason I wanted to tell you about the number of times the sarcophagus fits in the king's chamber is 137 times, right? Which is the math constant alpha.
Yeah.
But it also directly relates to the actual resonance frequency of the sarcophagus itself, because the resonance frequency is 117 hertz. And that may not sound related, but it is related because the Great Pyramid is 11/7. So it's 117.
Right.
11/7 is the base over the height
Right.
of the Great Pyramid. And then in addition, the square root of 137, which is the fine structure constant, is 11.7.
Okay. Yeah.
So the
those numbers.
resonance frequency obviously has to do with the volume, just as you're pointing out. It has to do with the, probably on the circular vases, something where there's like a tightest point
Mhm.
and then probably a larger point or something like that. The composition, I'm sure as well, it's got to be a particular type of stone, I would guess, to be able to make it like a musical instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a particular composition of a lot of that granite, that Aswanian granite. I mean, they seem to have been using that for a reason in a lot of these things. Although there is some variation here and there. I mean, the Serapeum boxes are a variety of different stones. We've also been, my friends Kyle and Russ Allen, that run that Brothers of the Serpent podcast, I travel with them a lot. They've been also recording the resonant frequencies of a lot of those boxes at Saqqara. We've been slowly over years managing to get in each of them and sort of document them and try to find like the resonant frequencies inside those boxes as well. Well, they have two frequencies really, width and length, where they resonate.
What did you think with the way that Chris Dunn kind of revised his theory and presented it at the CPAK conference, where the Great Pyramid was like a giant musical instrument?
Yeah,
which also was like perfectly timed with what I was presenting.
Indeed.
Which we didn't even coordinate anything.
Yeah, I think his use. First of all, I admire him greatly for like, he's one of those guys that when he'll make if he has a suggestion and he, something comes up later on that disproves it, or he'll walk that back, he'll acknowledge it and talk about it. He did that with some of the piezoelectricity theories that he'd had in the past, because one of the realizations around Aswanian granite is it actually has quite a low percentage of quartz in it relative to other types of granite. And then the adoption of really what is brand new science in terms of the science behind earthquake lights, and just basically you're just, squeezing granite, and these types of hard stone can in fact just cause the free flow of electrons. And how that perfectly, to me, seems like it slotted right into his theory on the pyramid. So, and then like a giant musical instrument, like you said, he's still using that part of that theory that he has. I think he has, at least in terms of our current technological understanding, probably one of the better theories for how that thing may have functioned and what it did. I like his work. I enjoyed his book on it.
Well, I feel like, it's funny. I often use this example of holding like a whiskey bottle on one end, and say, okay, if this cast a shadow on the wall behind me and it made a circle, then the person sitting across from me is going to think that it's a circle that I'm holding.
Right.
But if someone to the right of me looks at it and looks at the shadow cast on the other wall, they would see a long rectangle with like a nose on the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, oh, it looks like a rectangle with a nose necessarily in 2 dimensions. Well, the truth is both are correct. And only when you have the perspective, it's like, that's why Einstein said you can only solve problems by going to a higher order of consciousness to be able to perceive the problem above the one that perceived the problem. Right. It's like you have to be able to see the higher order perspective in that I'm holding a cylinder.
Right.
Right.
I get it.
And that both are correct. So we have like Democrats, Republicans fighting over one side necessarily. Although sometimes, damn it, one side does definitely seem more right than others.
Yeah, this is true.
And I'm sticking to it. But the thing is that, maybe we're all just, like blindfolded men or women trying to touch the elephant and figure out what the heck we're touching.
I share that view, and I talk about it often as well as lacking, I think, the correct perspective to perceive what it is we're looking at in a lot of ways. It's the analogy I like to use is a similar one. It's like taking a cell phone or something like this back in time, and even 50 or 60 years, but let's say 100 or 1,000 years, and it just looks like a shiny piece of black glass that probably breaks if you bang on it to somebody back then. But you and I probably couldn't make one of these right now, but we have the context to understand what it is. We know what touch screens are, the internet, like little phone cameras, microphones, all of the aspects that go into us being able to look at this and comprehend what it is and how it works. Like that's that, I guess, technological context that we have that lets us understand it. I think in a lot of cases, and this also applies to the Great Pyramid, that's why I said within our current technological framework, I think we're lacking a lot of that context just yet. And the only way we get there is with more open-minded investigation into it to try and build up that context. So now we can look at it and say, okay, this is actually doing something different or is meant for something different. If once we gain that context, we might be able to put it in the right framework and actually figure it out. But I think we're lacking some of that context right now.
So I really consider you a man of science, but also with an open mind, because you're not stuck in, from all the videos I've watched of you, you're just very curious and you don't care who's right necessarily. You just want to get to the right answers. And that's one of the things I really like about your work.
Thank you.
And so you're like an open-minded, not scientism oriented scientist, which I think is great. And
cheers.
But I really want to ask you the question, what do you think? So you said that you like the theory that's put forward by Chris Dunn as being, the purpose of one of the functions that the pyramids at least performed. And by the way, I do agree. But the context that I'm looking at this from now is maybe the performance, again, it's like looking at, the leg of an elephant and saying it's a column, or it's like looking at the trunk and saying it's this or that.
It's a snake. Yeah.
Maybe it's a combination of things, right? That you could actually start to perceive, and I have my own theory on this, but I'd love to hear yours, of what do you think the pyramids actually were for?
Yeah, I like that approach. Yeah, I'm not sure it's just a single purpose thing either. And like I said, that's why I bounded that my admiration for it in terms of like, this is within our technological framework and context. I'm still not sure that's exactly what or how the pyramids worked or what they were for. I like his theory in that he explains a lot of, and it's the only one that I know of that really explains a lot of the, just from an engineering perspective, explains a lot of the different attributes of the pyramids, the shafts, the blank ended shafts that lead to the Queen's chamber that stopped 3 or 4 inches before they ever got in there, the King's chamber shafts, the subterranean chamber, and the descending passage and all that sort of stuff. So I think he is casting all of those elements of it in a solution that is within what our current technological understanding. But I also absolutely think that these things weren't just probably they show that degree of sophistication that means they wouldn't have been just a single purpose thing. I think there is potentially a lot of different functions or applications for it, or even symbolic reasons for it, things like that. I don't think you can just put it in one box and say that's what it is. That's what I'd say about that. And I think that applies to, a lot of these sites, not just the pyramids, but also, Abu Sir and some other places, seem to have had a number of different functions when you look at them. I don't know if that explains my perspective on it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you what I think it might be.
Yep.
If you're interested.
I would love to hear it.
I believe it's just like the cylinder thing I was just describing. One of the things that I figured out not long ago, there's a big discrepancy in the music community on whether music should be 432 or 440 hertz.
Right.
You may have heard of this.
Mm-hmm.
And Verdi was 432 and Mozart was 432, but the music community in general doesn't really adopt it. They don't really understand that it's a geometric relationship, that music is the geometry we experience with our ears and geometry is the music we experience with our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also another argument within another circle, which says for those that accept 432, they say, but 528 is also a special thing and it's not in the 432 scale, which you may have heard of that, right? But actually, if you took the Great Pyramid complex, Giza, and you took the upper right corner, so looked at it from an aerial view, so the northeast corner of the Great Pyramid down to the southwest corner of Menkaure, and made a giant rectangle out of it. Guess what the ratio is? 432 to 528.
Huh. Yeah, yeah. This is
Comes out to 9-11. It's the same. It's the same ratio. But what's interesting about it is I found, because I do work in music theory,
mhm.
and I found that 528 is actually part of the 432 scale when you consider 24 notes in the scale.
Okay, which is what
It's
the
exactly perfect. It fits perfectly within the 432 24 note scale, which is what the Egyptians would have used.
Yeah.
The same thing that the Indians would have used as well. So when we consider it from that perspective, then both are correct, right? The people fighting for 432 and the people fighting for 528.
yeah,
It's the same scale. They're just looking at it again like the elephant and the guys with the blindfolds, trying to determine which each part of the elephant is.
right.
And both are right. So what's interesting to me is that I believe, after a lot of work and research on this, that the Great Pyramid is actually a kind of a totem for mankind. It was built by, I believe, people that would be well before what we consider dynastic Egyptian.
Yep.
I believe that, it's either, I don't know exactly. I mean, I'll tell you what I believe. I believe it's 13,000 years old,
Okay.
the Giza Pyramid complex. But there is an argument to be made that it could also be one more cycle back,
Right.
which means that it would be another, you'd have to add 24,000 years on top of that 13,000 years.
Mhm.
So then you would have, 37,000 years that it could be. And I believe that, that what it's showing us is the precession of equinox, that it's showing us a clock, like a giant clock. And the entire Giza Plateau represents that clock. And you've probably seen the stuff related to this.
Yeah.
And I've never actually kind of given an overall theory of this before and talked about it online. So this will be the first time I'm saying this. But I believe that it's pointing us to a precessional clock that points us back to what would be the age of Leo.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is back to the Orion Belt constellation correlation.
Yep.
That was what Robert Bauval.
Yep.
There are Orion correlations literally all over the world. We see them at Xi'an, China. We see them also at Teotihuacan, Mexico. Orion's Belt. I just discovered a new group of megalithic sites in Florianopolis, Brazil, that were exactly Orion's Belt as well. And they're even in Clavicairn, Scotland, right? Literally, they're everywhere. And so what I believe it's basically built for is to tell whoever in the future of this precessional clock and the existence of precessional time. That as we go forward in procession, we also go backwards in precession.
Yeah.
And 1 degree in procession is 1 day. And 1 degree in precession is 72 years
That's right. Yeah.
of our time. And I believe that it's telling us also about the knowledge that they had of the 4 pole stars that we have.
Yeah.
And that we transit through this precession of equinox. And there's probably a reason why it's this rectangular shape. The corners may be harder than we think.
Yeah. That's a good.
And that might be why our history doesn't go beyond 6,000 years.
Right. Yeah. That's the cycle of cataclysm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I believe that ultimately the pyramid is a spiritual ascension chamber that actually leads you into higher dimension. I actually believe that the walls of the king's chamber, that each of the blocks where we have each of the different petroglyphs on the walls, each block is irregular, and that each of those irregular blocks is actually a coordinate system.
Yeah.
For each of those stars, right, that are in that. And that this is some sort of a Stargate that we don't understand.
Yeah.
And that it would use a tremendous amount of power in order to affect that. And so the pyramid was, in that sense, a power plant for the purpose of being able to, it might just be astrally project. I've experienced it myself, or maybe even physicality.
Yeah.
And we simply don't know. But this is what I actually believe it is, that being able to go beyond what we would term as the speed of light, and I might actually call it the speed of our perception, is more about, in my opinion, being able to ascend our consciousness to a higher level of conscious state to perceive higher dimension. And that becomes the rate limiter for us as a people, as a society. And I think the pyramid is in this construct. And I believe this construct, I'm definitely a fan more and more of simulation hypothesis.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Me as well, actually.
And so this becomes a totem. The Great Pyramid becomes a totem, not dissimilar from the one in the movie Inception.
Right.
Which is you spin the top, and when the top falls, right, you know that you're out of the dream.
Right.
And the Great Pyramid becomes a reflection of our level of consciousness. And it's very much tied to Orion, which represents the hero's journey of mankind.
Yeah. I mean, and this symbology of stargates and this type of thing is really all over Egypt. I mean, I think this is, if indeed, let's assume that's the case. I mean, I think there's a cultural inheritance that's come down, and they seem to have been telling this story all throughout dynastic Egypt. I mean, this is written on the temples. You see the literal representation of things like stargates at Dendera and at other places. That's a fascinating hypothesis.
So to me, that's kind of like, I laid in the sarcophagus for 5 hours, and I went out and went all over to the boot system, Botus.
Yeah.
Went to, and there are countless numbers of people have experienced things like this inside the Great Pyramid.
Napoleon.
Who spent the night there, right? And said, you wouldn't believe me if I told you.
Yep.
So, in the morning. And Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. And I believe that this is why all the polymaths went there as well. Because, they were basically leaving encryptions to themselves through time. Da Vinci also, that's the subject of my television show on Gaia, Codex. It's about the 3 years that Da Vinci spent in Egypt.
Huh.
And I found it all in a letter he wrote to the Sultan of Babylon, Cairo, because actually the ancient name of Cairo was Babylon. So that's why even today there's Babylon Fortress in old Cairo.
Yeah.
Right? It's right next to Ma'adi. And so this is how I found a lot of this stuff, because Da Vinci had encrypted all of it in his paintings. It's across all of his paintings from 1486 onward.
Wow. Okay.
So this is a super fascinating story. And I believe that we're now starting to scratch at the surface of understanding this. And it's a function of us raising our consciousness. And the King's Chamber is the fourth dimension representation of time. And I believe it's actually showing us this precessional clock that's going around this, 24,000 year cycle. And I purposely say 24,000 years because the precession, I believe, is slower on one side and faster on the other.
Right.
As we get closer to Sirius A, our sister star. So I believe that this is actually what this is. That we're looking at a representation of a totem for mankind to tell us about the cycle of cataclysm. And just as the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey came about because Joseph Campbell studied tens of thousands of stories that were told at campfires, right, for millennia by humanity, and they all had the same story arc. And that's why if you ever want to pitch a movie to Hollywood, you better follow Hero's Journey, because it's the only one that they know will succeed.
Yeah.
And so basically, what is that representation? I believe it's Orion, which also is a 2-to-1 rectangle. The only difference is if I took, so the two base stars down here, if that becomes one side of the rectangle, the sarcophagus goes in the middle of the room and matches exactly the three belt stars. It frames the belt stars. And I found the chip marks in the floor where they picked up the sarcophagus from too.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not
a nice thing about having LiDAR scans of everything. I can see everything all the time now.
Yeah.
And then if you inscribe a circle within this rectangle, so if you inscribe a circle within the rectangle and you exoscribe a circle around it as well, then that gives you this location and this location. the intersection points.
Right.
So then you've got Orion going through the procession.
Yeah,
and it's basically taking you through the Kali Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga,
Yep.
the Satya Yuga, and this becomes a giant clock. This is my belief, and I do believe that it created a tremendous amount of power in order to affect all of this. And so maybe this could be, and the spiritual ascension, and I'm not the only one that would say that the pyramid it's already played a role massively in many people's spiritual ascensions.
100%. Yeah.
I think it's all of these things. I don't think that it's like one and then the other one is wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's telling us that all of them are components of it being right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with the sentiment. And it's a fascinating theory. And like you say, it's definitely in terms of any sort of even spiritual awakening or being on the path to even get into these topics. It already does play that role. I mean, it functions as a totem in some respects, just in that way anyway, right? It's just in our culture today, without ever having visited it can work in that way for people.
Well, I look at it like this, the Kundalini, I'm sure you're probably aware of,
Yep.
right? You've got the root chakra,
Yep.
then the sacral, then the solar plexus. And you could think of the root chakra as being 1 part love and 6 parts judgment. And then the second chakra, the sacral, would be 2 parts love and 5 parts judgment.
Yeah.
And the third becomes 4 parts judgment and 3 parts love. And the heart tips the scale towards love. So then it becomes 4 parts love and 3 parts judgment. And then the throat becomes 5 parts love and 2 parts judgment. If you think about our conscious awareness, we finally get up here to love, right? It's all love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we then go into the next octave of experience. That's what I fully believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we have to decide to love instead of be right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not easy to do, right? That's really difficult to do. But I think that's what enlightenment is. It's when your desire for one objective truth gets superseded by your desire to express love instead.
Right.
And we're living in a world that's a backdrop of duality. And it's like a simulation that we're here as a dimensionally limited avatar self to transcend through this duality and choose love instead of choosing judgment.
Yes, it feels like our culture is built up around the judgment side of things rather than the other. And this is Hancock talks about this. You were talking about it. It feels like any ancient culture, the builders of some of these monuments weren't in the same ratio as us. If you were going to ratio it between love and judgment, it seems like we've gone a little bit too far down one side of that as a culture. I mean, Graham talks about it as like losing a link to spirituality and things like that. I think it's one of the major significant reasons why this investigation and trying to find out how that a civilization function and what they're trying to tell us is so important, because there's a lot of people that go, well, it's just all ancient history. It's just, these monuments, they're old ancient monuments. Who really cares? I think it's a fundamental, important concept to get into, because we could genuinely change the whole zeitgeist of our civilization if we could change some of those principles, because we have this idea, it's like a pillar of our identity as a modern human in this civilization, is the idea that, well, we were all, cavemen and in the Stone Age 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, and we've had this kind of linear progression up to what we would call an advanced civilization today. That's what everybody's taught. It's just a background piece of information that is how we identify ourselves as modern humans. And I think if you could change that to this idea of this cyclical process between, civilization and cataclysm, and the idea that potentially this other rise of civilization and these other concepts, and they might have lived entirely differently to us. I think if you could teach everybody that fundamental principle, rather than this sort of, okay, we're Stone Ages, we're a modern civilization, this is the only way that civilization looks. I think you could genuinely start to address some of the big issues with, you know, our future, like address the real long-term problems we have as a species, help to elevate that level of consciousness. It's one of the reasons why I think this is such an important area of investigation, and also one of the reasons why people who do embark down this path find themselves with significant meaning and purpose and revelation. They start to understand some of these things. I think you start to lift your own kind of spiritual level, if you like.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely, you could not, you definitely, what you're saying resonates big time for me. You know, you could look at the whole Nile as this backbone of Osiris, and that each of the temples along the Nile are actually representations of the different chakra points. And you get up here to the tributaries and to Abu Rawash, and Abu Rawash had 2 pyramids on it. The pyramids, you know, one of them was 300 feet high. Have you been to Abu Rawash?
Yes, a couple times. Yeah.
Okay, so I was able to analyze it. There were 2 Italian explorers that I did all the analysis of their work and everything from 1958. But then I went on my own, and I, of course, measured all of the slope angles because I was looking for the missing notes on the 24-note scale.
Yeah.
And I found that one of the notes is the same angle as the step pyramid, which basically gives you exactly the 48.3 degree slope of the, you know, that becomes, I think it's the minor second.
Yep.
And so that I was looking also for the minor third and the major sixth. And what I found was that pyramid shows up in Abu Rawash. The satellite, the Jed satellite, is that pyramid.
Okay. Yeah.
So of the two pyramids. And you know, this was really kind of startling for me, because then I started thinking, okay, so what about the other pyramid? Because the other pyramid is a 60-degree slope angle. So Abu Rawash Jed satellite has a slope of 67.38 degrees. And the larger of the 2 pyramids, the Jed Efre pyramid, has a slope of 60 degrees. And so as I looked at that, I realized, wait a minute, these are the exact 2 angles of what we call the Philosopher's Stone pyramids, or the Philosopher's Stone triangles. One is an equilateral triangle with a square and then a circle inside of it. You've seen that as the alchemical symbol of the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
The other one is by Michael Meyer. It's called Atalanta Fusions from 1617, on an etch that he did where it shows a man holding a giant compass against a brick wall that's got a painting of a circle and a steeper angled pyramid or triangle inside of it, and a man and woman inside the square and circle. Have you seen that before?
I think so. Yeah.
The Atalanta Fusions.
Okay.
And so basically I realized that the 2 pyramids on Abu Rawash Plateau
Match those.
match those. Exactly. And that the elevation of those 2 pyramids is 300 feet higher than Giza.
Yeah.
And it's 8 kilometers northwest of Giza.
Yep.
And so when you look at that, then you realize, wait a minute, if this was a 60-degree angle of ascent on this pyramid, and the whole thing was made of rose granite on the outside and casing stones, and if you've been there, you'll know when you look around from standing on top of it, if you climbed it, there's like blocks that have been thrown like hundreds of meters away.
Yeah, there's rubble all around that site. Yeah.
There's rubble all around the site, right? And they have sharp lines. They're like cleanly cut and everything. So I started looking, you know, really deep into this, and we think that the Tower of Babel should actually have been in Mesopotamia, but there is no proof that it was there. They never found it. And actually, it should be in the land of Cush, because that's how it's described in the Bible. And it should be next to the river Gihon. Well, Josephus, Fra Mauro map of 1457, Josephus the scholar, as well as Herodotus, all said that the Nile was the river Gihon. So then what is this building that would have stood 600 feet high to someone looking from the Giza Plateau? That's 120 feet taller than the Great Pyramid.
Yeah. At Abu Rawash.
At Abu Rawash. Exactly. So I've actually imaged this, and I'm going to show it to you. You'll be the first to see this, actually.
Awesome.
No one else has seen this. So my team will probably be kind of pissed at me for showing it, but oh well. They just finished some of this imaging, and you know, I'm kind of
It is
into this. Okay, cool. Here we go.
It is kind of spectacular how you can see each pyramid site from the next one along.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I see. I knew you would appreciate that.
Right, so it's raised up. But we'll merge this with the other model at Giza that's further away there.
So this is what Abu Rawash would have looked like.
Yep.
I don't know why it's got that thing on it. Try that again. Whoops. No. Can you see the whole screen now or no?
Yeah.
You've got this big ledge, right? So it's raised up. But we'll merge this with the other model at Giza that's further away there.
And we're merging it with Giza so you can place it exactly against. So this would be the high point, because this
it's way up on a
300 feet
mountain.
higher.
It is, yeah. It's up on the top of a hill or a prominence.
Right. And I actually believe that we have evidence that would suggest that this might actually have been the true Tower of Babel, because the ancient name of Cairo was also Babylon.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, there's a lot more around that whole area of Abu Rawash. There are caves and caverns. I don't know if you've had a chance to explore out there. There's these big underground caves. It almost looks like, to me, some of these chambers under the ground there look like a serapeum that doesn't have anything left in it. There's massive high ceilings and alcoves. I mean, it's all been rubberized now, but you go in there and there's no boxes or anything else in there. But that was a much bigger complex than just that one little spot on top of the hill where the pyramid was.
What do you think happened to cause that place to just explode like that? Or was it just a quarry that, you know, if we believe the story, then they just never finished it?
Well, I think it was finished.
Then why would they build two?
I definitely think it was finished. The people that think it was an unfinished pyramid, I mean, you can literally see berms made from quarry rubble.
Totally.
I think it was definitely quarried. I mean, it may have, if there was an explosion, I mean, there's certainly evidence for that in Giza, I think. I don't know specifically about evidence for it at Abu Rawash. I mean, there is stuff spread out, but if you consider it from a quarry perspective, I mean, it's very convenient in terms of, like, it's pretty much downhill from there to anywhere you want to take the stone. So it's like if your source of this nice stone that you want to use for quarrying and building is on top of a hill, it's a lot easier to transport it down a hill than it is to, you know, push it up a hill or take it from flat ground. So I think it was a convenient stone source for the quarriers to take material from. And I mean, this giant pit that's here, and, you know, Zaywad El Aran is the other one that's, I think, very similar to this in terms of design. That's now on an army base, but yeah, as you can see the Giza pyramids in the background. Yeah, I've been all up over here. This is that pyramid. Yeah, I mean, that'd be a good location for like a Tower of Babel, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, you think about a 60-degree angle of ascent.
Yeah, that's very steep.
And it's got the same base size as Menkaure Pyramid.
It does, yeah.
345.6 feet.
That'd be taller.
It would be incredibly imposing.
Yep.
Right? And you can already see we're pretty high up compared to the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, it is up on a promontory.
Yeah. And so I believe that what we're looking at here is the throat chakra. And that what is represented by the Philosopher's Stone pyramids, the two Philosopher's Stone pyramids, is the pineal gland, which is the pituitary. The pineal.
Yep.
Is the Djed satellite pyramid, the smaller one, and the pituitary gland is represented by the equilateral triangle one, the 60-degree ascent of Djed. It's interesting. Also, they use the word Djed.
Yeah, Djedephra.
Djed-Ephraim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Djed has always represented the rising of the Djed pillar.
Yep.
The Wadjet. So Nimrod was associated with Orion, but he was the son of Cush, who was supposed to be the founder of the Cushite people. Cush was never outside of. There's no reference ever to Cush ever having been outside of Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, and the Somalia area.
Mm-hmm.
It's just never been. So the idea that would have been the location of Tower of Babel and the Genesis version of Babylon. I'm not saying that there wasn't a Neo-Babylon that was created,
Mm-hmm.
but Babylon is related to the baboon, and the baboon
African
is a reference to Thoth.
That's right. That's one of his other forms, along with the ibis. Right? He's the baboon.
Exactly. So where would he be? He's going to be, there in Egypt.
Yep.
And the Gihon River is there, and then you can see these blocks strewn all. I mean, this is hundreds of meters.
Yeah, you're
away.
right. It is that if those are blocks from the pyramid, that's a long way away from it.
This happens to also be the satellite pyramid, is the same one as the Rome Gaius Cestius pyramid.
Yep.
That's 2,000 years old.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And there it is, the Atlantifugens, and there's the other Philosopher's Stone.
Yep. Wow. Okay.
So, if you look at, this is Vitruvian Man, Da Vinci's work,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can see here, there are horizontal and vertical lines that are across the whole body. And if you look at the reference above, because it's written above, and it says he cut him into 1/14, so it's 14 parts. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
Osiris.
Yep. Right.
Cut into 14 parts in the exact same places. The shoulders, the chest, the groin, the knees. So that's when we figured out, if we place the pyramid on top of Vitruvian Man at exactly the right way related to the squaring of the circle, then you end up with the Earth and the Moon relationship.
Right.
And you also find that each of these lines represents exactly the position of each of the chambers inside the pyramid, including the ones that have not yet been found.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I have a feeling they might have gone looking for those recently. They closed the pyramid over the last summer for a few months. I get the feeling
they were trying to figure out a way, because they mentioned it to me as well. They were trying to figure out a way. There's a false wall that I had found in 2020, and that they also saw on Muon scan. I found it with a ring tapping the wall in the Queen's Chamber on the east wall, and it's hollow. There's a whole hollow section about this large. You know where that big what's it called, the corniche or whatever?
The
There's
alcove
this thing that it's got the corbels that go up
the alcove
into this peak. Yep, and the alcove. So on that same wall to the left of where that is, you tap on the wall and it's hollow.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try that.
So they're thinking that maybe there's a way that they can get into the new chamber, which is at the throat chakra line on Vitruvian Man. And they believe that there's actually like an elevator shaft there. And this is actually Zahi Hawass who believed this. And so Waziri told me about all of this because he was plagued with the dilemma before he got, left. He was plagued with the question of whether or not they should notch out the chevrons.
Right.
To get into the corridor, to get into the upper chamber, right? Because now they know as well from the Muon scan that there is a, 26-degree angle of ascent, just like the one
in the Grand Gallery.
In the Grand Gallery.
Well, all the passages, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
And basically, there are two ways to get in. They thought they could go that way and do a notch that's like half meter by half meter and get someone or a robot or something to go through it. Or they were going to have to try to find something to access the upper chamber, maybe chambers.
I think they've been doing that.
Through the Queen's chamber.
Well, I think they've also been trying to get in from the so-called relieving chambers.
Yes, from the relieving chambers as well.
They've been in there. So last time I was in there, I mean, they literally, a year or two ago, there was a power, it was never there before, but there was a power cable going up into the entrance to the relieving chambers in the top left of the Grand Gallery. And then the last time I was there in February, March, I mean, they literally just have the ladder for it strapped to the railings of the Grand Gallery. There's this massive ladder strapped to there, and I was trying to get the guards to like let us take it off and get up there and get up into those relieving chambers. But they've definitely been doing stuff up in those relieving chambers, and I do wonder if they've been drilling and trying to get endoscopes in there to see that chamber.
Well, I happened to be in Egypt in March of 23.
Yeah, I was there too.
The night that they discovered the corridor and got endoscopic footage of it.
Yeah, behind the chevrons at the front. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. They basically put it right through the crack, and I was renting the pyramid that day.
Yeah. I remember I was there around the same time when they had all the scaffolding, and I saw a lot of people working up there.
All over where the original entrance was.
Yeah.
So basically, what it's such a fascinating subject matter, but if we looked at this thing called the Fra Mauro map, I think there's a whole story that's like coming together here potentially, and I think it's going to unite all of the different perspectives, and we're going to find that everybody was right for the most part. So this was a map I found in Florence called the Fra Mauro map from 1457. So it's pre-Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
And it's a huge map of the entire world, right? The known world at the time. So you see Spain right here. It's like you go straight up from like Central Europe, like Ukraine area, go straight up in the sky and look down. And then this would be Africa right here.
Yep.
This is Spain. This is Italy. This is Greece.
Yep.
Right? Why Africa is taking this shape, kind of interesting. Don't know. But if we look closely, then you can kind of get down to this point over here. It's kind of blurry, but I've taken the liberty of expanding it. Over here, you can find Egypto.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I noticed was that there was 5 pyramids where the pyramid complex is. Okay, but he's not the first to have said that, right? Or that there were more pyramids. There was a French explorer who said that as well.
If they're on the Nile, they're on the wrong side of it. But yeah, if the river's
no, it's on the right side. It's just upside down.
Oh, it's upside down. Okay.
So this is upside down. So this is Africa right here, upside down, because you're looking from Europe.
Yeah,
to
all right.
So this is Spain.
Yeah.
This is Italy.
Yeah.
This is Greece, right? So then you've got the Nile River here, and look at the name on it.
Yeah.
Gihon. And then immediately left of this, after I made this photograph, I found that it was written right where Cairo is as Babylonia.
Yep.
So I think there's more to this story. And I think we're going to find that probably, I believe personally, that it's going to end up uniting all of the different stories. Everyone's going to turn out to be right. And that's going to be kind of the ultimate paradox, that we're going to learn that everyone has a piece of the truth, but not the whole truth. And that the only way to capture the whole truth would be to get the individual unique perspectives of every possible subjective viewpoint.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why we're here.
Indeed. Yeah, I like that idea. I think
so. You've been following simulation theory. Simulation hypothesis.
Well, yes, I understand. I mean, I wouldn't a fairly superficial level. I'm not like deep into the mathematics of it or anything. But my understanding of it is, the deeper we look into the fabric of reality, it seems a bit more like a programming language than anything else. Things like that, where it's just and just from a broad technological perspective, how I mean this is we could be. I just like the idea that it's possible that we are just simulations running on computers of the future kind of deal, and that you can set up experiments like this and let them run to see what would happen. It's just, and I don't know how to break it out. It's like being stuck in the Matrix or being some of the movies from the 80s where there's these characters in computer games and these environments that figure that out.
You'd never want to play the game, though. Think about it. If you and I made a game, we're not going to make the game where we have omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence.
No.
That's no fun.
No.
Because then I would know how we're going to play poker, and I don't know how you're going to be dealt, and I'm going to know how you're going to deal with that, that how you were dealt.
Yep.
And it's no fun like that. So the only thing that would be fun is to erase your memory.
Right, and see what happens. And we've certainly seemed like we've been through that.
Orion is unique. No algorithms, no propaganda, and no exploitation. Just end-to-end quantum secure data. Messages, groups, and shared media behind a wall of next-generation encryption. Well, the world does get stranger and stranger.
This is true.
As we just saw an assassination attempt, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's like, yeah, it does. It is bizarre. The synchronicity or the event, the turns that events take is very interesting. Yeah, from that perspective, it's like you couldn't script this stuff, or if you did, it would be something everyone would tune into.
So is there anything that you would like to, now that you've just seen all this, is there anything that you'd like to, that you could think of that might actually lend credence to what maybe I just posited? Or alternatively, say, no, this is totally not right.
Well, I do. I think there's similarities that might emerge from some of the analysis work again happening on those vessels. I think I'd love to see more analysis done on more of the boxes in a similar vein to see if those ratios turn up. Also to look for, and I don't know if this has been done in a lot of those other vessels, to see if there are things like alpha omega or other indentations. I love that idea that we talked about Lahoon and other places, like to see if we can find more evidence for that type of thing in some of these other granite chambers and granite vessels would be, I think, a really interesting tack to take on that.
Well, I'll show you this. Here's another place that you might know well, called Abydos, Osirion.
Yeah.
And you probably know that this is probably considered to be one of, if not the oldest site.
Yes. Yeah.
Right at the Osirion. So here we go. So this was not discovered by me. This was discovered in this film capture that we have right here.
Okay. You found on the walls, those quartzite walls.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could see on the walls right here, there's an omega shape. It's actually raised.
Yeah. Yep.
There's an X shape that's a cross shape right here, and then an A shape on the wall right here. Let's see if I can get this.
They are planning. I mean, the last time I've been talking every time we.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Got it. Now, if it's going to frame. Okay, no, I don't think it's good. So here's the omega? Yes. Right here? Yes. Here's the alpha. Yes. In the exact correct place. And
yeah.
So basically, that's right on the wall at the Osirion. And it's kind of a coincidence that I'm wearing an Alpha Chi Omega shirt on my back.
Yeah.
And even the shape of the Chi is a straight cross like that as well. So you see the cross. I've got much better imagery of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've got imagery of it. I've filmed that place inside and out several times. They are planning to pump the mud out and actually see how deep it goes. I every time I go there, we end up connecting with the guy who's running kind of all the project and the work there. So they are planning on excavating and at least pumping that mud out. The water level was much the water level was much lower than I've ever seen it before. The last time I was there, so they're working on it.
Well, they finally cleaned it out.
Well, yeah, they got the rubble out of there, and
they got the rubble out, and we went there, and one of my guys on my team dropped his phone in it, and that was game over. Yeah. And so then they decided to go and raise money to clean it out, and that happened. Then the problem is that the moment that they successfully did that, then the Antiquities decided to charge only private fees so it doesn't get messy again. So unless you have a private visit permission, you can't even go to the Osirion anymore.
That's right. Well, it's been that way for a little while now, the private visit status, but we do it every time. Just it's so worth getting down in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the best. It's one of the best places to go to for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is, I think I have it here.
Such a bizarre place, like built on top of a very small natural aquifer. Like it's a different water to the Nile water. And, there's a tunnel that runs beneath it, from it, down low in it, all the way beneath the Temple of Seti I towards the Nile. they dropped a core drill down out in the courtyard in front of the temple of Seti I, and they drilled down on the axis of the Osirion, and they hit granite. Like there's some manufactured tunnel that runs towards the Nile from the Osirion.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So there's a tunnel that runs towards the Nile.
Yep.
Interesting. No, I never heard that one before. So this is another view also of the Abydos Osirion. And you can see like these lines across it like this.
Yeah.
Also raised. You see this? A little circle right here also.
Mm-hmm.
Going across like this. And this line here. There should be no linear lines on this. And then there's flower of life everywhere.
Well,
there.
Yeah.
Right. But it's on everything. It's not just on the sections that we commonly know. All of them are covered with flower of life. And it's just fascinating. Here it is. You can even see, it almost looks like a rose in the center. And this is raised. So this is not something that could have been done after the fact.
No, yeah.
It's got the same pock marking and everything on it. So you see this clear circle. It could be a line down here, right? Omega.
Yeah, I mean, those rocks have been shaped. I mean, that's the same scoops that you see in like the Aswan Quarry. You see that on these walls here. There was those rocks were shaped with that same whatever technology it was that was done to form it.
Yeah, and you can even see there's like a line inside of the Omega as well, like a mini alpha inside of there. So, I mean, we found in Saqqara, and I'll be happy to share with you all the video footage. We found in Saqqara that every sarcophagus of the 24 sarcophagus, we were able to review 23 of them out of the 24. Again, interesting that it's 24.
Yeah.
Basically have Alpha Chi Omega on them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. And that is interesting. Yeah.
Every single one. It's like, really? So there's something that is pointing back to this. Let's see if I can find Saqqara for you real quick. Let's see. The last time I went there, I'm trying to think. Oh, the time that I discovered all this was when I went in April of 2022. Where my glasses go.
Yeah, Serapeum's a fascinating place for me. I always looked at those boxes from the perspective of sort of precision and machining and what they would take and logistics in terms of moving them into there.
I can see
an X coming across right here. It's like very
triangles inside each other,
lightly etched.
Yeah, on my finger.
There's an X.
I can see that two triangles are.
Yeah,
right there.
With your mouse, I can kind of see it.
Oh, there's omega inside of it too. Look, there's an omega. You see it right here? Yeah. Oh, look, here's my finger. Trace the bottom of the omega like this, and then it goes like this.
Yep.
Oh my God.
See the X underneath my finger?
Yeah.
Just like
this.
And there's an A
here.
Yeah, I can see the point to it. Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, that's Alpha Omega. Right in there. That's beauty.
But every sarcophagus, and that's not even one of the good examples of it.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's like there's literally Alpha Omega on every one.
See that eye right here? That's definitely an eye. See that? Most definitely an eye. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at all my footage of these boxes.
Yep. There's literally on these are all different ones.
Yeah.
There's another one right there. Oh wait, I think that's the same one.
I think. Yeah,
that's the same one.
Very interesting.
Yeah. All 24 of them. 23 rather.
Well, yeah, there's one limestone, rough kind of limestone box in there that I'm not sure. That one to me is like...
Say again?
Well, there's one rough limestone box in there. It's a large box that's over near the big rose granite one near the entrance. It's I get the feeling that one might have been...
this one right here, I think you're talking about.
Maybe. Is that the limestone one? Let me... There's one limestone.
No,
this is granite.
This is It's right by the entrance. This one.
Yeah. I think this is definitely
Right, here's the scorpion.
looks like granite to me.
Of the scorpion.
Oh, there, yeah.
Here are the arms of the scorpion.
So this is like etched with the scorpion in here as well. And there's designs on all of them as well. You can kind of see them, but somehow I don't know how they got so worn, or they must be super old, but you could kind of see them across. So if you listen to what I'm saying on here.
1,500 before Christ. So there's a scorpion on here. Right, here's the scorpion. Here's the body of the scorpion. Here are the arms of the scorpion. Here are the tentacles coming off the front. Here's the tail of the scorpion. Right. Here's an omega right here. So omega right here. And Adam, you saw an alpha somewhere? No, an eye shape. An eye shape. Oh yeah, I see the eye shape right there.
That's definitely an eye.
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you can see there's a whole design on this side.
I see the A. Wait, there's right on the outside of the omega.
This is the lid in the hallway.
The omega goes like this, and then it goes from here straight up to here, straight down like this. There's the A. Yeah, completely. That's what it is. This right here, an A, lines on both sides, and then the scorpion.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Scorpion's here. Right.
Yeah, I mean, definitely be keeping my eyes a bit more open when it comes to looking at these things. This is a whole different perspective on a lot of these artifacts and architecture that I hadn't seen before. So thank you for that.
No, I'm very happy to share this with you, and I know you have you have a pretty large following that follows what you do and everything. And if ever you'd like to get any of this or segments of it out to
thank you.
Some of these other people, maybe even starting just with some of the mathematics of it and how it might correlate also to your vases.
Yeah.
I would be more than happy to.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe we'll do that at some point. I would love to do that. We can I can record a chat with you about specifically some of the mathematics, particularly as it relates to your research. I think I need to get a bit more grounded in some of the musical theory and your work as well before I do that. But yes, I think that'd be great. I've been planning to do a follow-up video on the vases and dive into some more depth on that. So that'd be great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, anything else you'd like to tell us that's like mysterious and interesting related to Egypt?
Oh, we could sit here for another 2 hours and go through some of those things. I've recently been, I've been taking I've done a deep dive into some of the erosion. I think that's up there on the Giza Plateau, as well as at sites like Saqqara. I think there's strong indication for much longer timelines just in some of that evidence, particularly not just the erosion. I mean, everyone's aware of how eroded some of those stones are, but I've found that it's quite an interesting comparison when you look at the megalithic stonework versus the other fourth dynasty structures, the stuff that like the Western Cemetery to the west of the Great Pyramid, or all of the structures to the east of the Great Causeway, to the south of the Great Causeway. These are also fourth dynasty structures. Supposedly, they're also made from limestone, the same nummulitic limestone that the megalithic core masonry is, but it doesn't show anything like the same amount of erosion. So that's been a kind of an interesting angle to take on some of it, and talking about how long it might take for, say, 2 feet of erosion to happen on some of these blocks that were also presumably for thousands of years cased in granite that would have protected them. So I think there's some interesting indications for longer timelines there. The other thing I'd mention along those lines is that there's been an interesting new paper that was put out in May, I think, of this year that talked about the fact that these pyramid sites were all built along what they've now discovered is an extinct branch of the Nile called the Aramat branch that would have only existed during the African humid period that ended, nearly 6,000 years ago. So it's like, okay, the Giza, the Valley Temple.
Is that 6,000 again?
Well, yeah, exactly. Like it was when the climate changed and the Sahara became a desert, because before that, in this humid period, it was a savanna. There would have been river systems and lake basins and all this type of thing there, that and enough rainfall, like up to 900 millimeters of rainfall a year, that would have supported much larger, tributary branches of the Nile. And it turns out that all these pyramid sites are built along that branch. So it's like, if you think structures like the Valley Temple were a harbor, that's what everybody says about it. Like, we're at the front of the Valley Temples, this harbor, and you've got the big wall of the Crow that's over near the plateau that's at that same elevation level. To me, it looks like a hydrological control feature. All of this makes sense really in the context of, well, okay, you'd probably build your harbor next to where the river is, as opposed to building it somewhere that, well, maybe you'll get water there during the inundation 3 months of the year, and maybe not. It makes a lot more sense to me that this would have actually been built when there was an actual river there, because this tributary, this Aramat branch was up to 1 kilometer wide in places. Like, it was a huge branch of the Nile, and they only just discovered that this is now, that's actually what these pyramid sites have been built along. But it all disappeared between 6,000 and 5,500 years ago, and it wasn't until nearly a millennium after that, like 700-800 years ago, that's when the Fourth Dynasty, and they started building at Giza, at least according to the Orthodox time frame. So I think there's some interesting new data coming out that suggests, okay, there might have been things here for longer periods, and they were, it seems like it makes much more sense when you put it in the context of a different climate and an entirely different environment, which also I think gives me a clue as to where we should be looking. I think if you consider the idea that, okay, so the Sahara is a desert by the time ancient Egypt, the dynastic civilization arises, and the only really livable land is in the floodplain. It's in the Nile Delta or in the Nile Valley. And that's where, the civilization emerged and they took it over. That's what we know of it today. And then all these sites that were built there, I mean, whether they were there before or not, they were inherited and rebuilt by the dynastic Egyptians. But during this humid period, I mean, the entire Sahara, it's the size of the Amazon rainforest. I mean, it's huge and it's untapped from an archaeological perspective. And I think it'd be really interesting is if we could apply, some of these new space-based satellite technologies that are able to penetrate through material to scan for that, look at where the ancient lake basins and river systems might have been in the Sahara, and to look there, because if there was a civilization that existed during that period, then they wouldn't have just been limited to the Nile Valley. I think it would have been all over that part of northern Africa that wasn't a desert at that point. So
yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, it makes me wonder too, as we say, 6,000 years. So every 6,000 years is just another season,
right? Yeah.
So we just went across the vernal equinox in 2012, and we've just gone into early spring, and so the planet's getting warmer and warmer. But the last 2,000 years, it was cold because we were in, different stages of winter. It'd be like, we were just finishing up with, I guess, early March, midway through March or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we're in February, and then we're in January.
Right.
And so this was the winter stage. And so the dark ages are tied to these stages.
These colder periods. That's right.
These colder periods. And so then we go back in time another 6,000 years, and that would have been during the fall, right? The autumn period of the 24,000 year cycle. And then the time when we would have been in Leo looking at it would have been, 13,000 years ago. And that would have been in the summer or the end of the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the height, right? That's, productive.
So
time.
There might just be a fractal of our seasons.
Could be. Yeah. I mean, that seems to be, it does follow that those are the kind of the markers for what we've seen as significant swings in climate and environment on the planet. They certainly seem to come in those intervals, right? There's the 12,000 one for sure. And
Younger Dryas, right? So Younger Dryas and then 6,000. I mean, it just seems a little coincidental that we have these sharp changes in climate every 6,000 years.
Right. I agree.
That also coincide with us having a new North Pole.
True. They do.
And now we're coming up on the end of that 6,000 years.
We are. Yes. Yes.
So it feels like, yeah. Well, first of all, I can't help but think simulation, and what a cool game.
Indeed. Yeah, I just wish we could.
Right? It's not a fun game until you know it's a game.
Yeah, yeah. I just wish our characters would last a little bit longer, because it's it's tough for the human mind to bend itself around some of these timescales, right? We tend to think of things in much just your tendency, just because our lifespans are so short. We don't think in long enough timescales.
If our lifespan's 72 years, we're not going to see 1 degree of the turn.
Yeah, well, if you're paying close attention for your entire life, you might. That's about it. But that is a weird one, isn't it? The fact that it's 1 degree of that precessional cycle is basically the average age of a human on the planet. It's interesting. Or the average maximum age, kind of deal.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Well, listen, I really want to thank you, Ben.
Thank you
for listening to this. I wanted to share some of this stuff with you.
Yeah, thank you.
So that it would start getting into your mind, because I know how curious your mind is. You're going to go to Egypt now, and you're going to be like, wait, what the?
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. In fact, I feel like I'm a guest on your podcast, and I was just fascinated by what you were saying. And yes, you've definitely colored my perspective on some of these things, and I'm definitely going to be keeping all of that in mind on these next visits to Egypt. It's fascinating research you're doing. So yeah, thank you for the invite, and thank you for sharing it with me. I very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'd love to get so after we get off this, I'd like to get your cell phone and exchange cell phone numbers, so I can share with you the stuff that, as we find it. If you're interested,
I'm very much interested.
I can share it with you.
Yes. And we talked before too. I'll connect you with some people in Turkey and things like that as well. So
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a really interesting, I think, dialogue, and we ended up in places that I didn't think we were going to end up, but I'm grateful that we did.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you again, Ben. And for anyone that wants to learn more about your stuff, I know the first place they should probably go is straight to UnchartedX on YouTube.
Indeed.
But anywhere else you'd like to direct them to?
UnchartedX.com as well. You'll pretty much find links to all of the social media and all the rest of it, the YouTube channel. I am on other platforms like Spotify and Rumble. But yeah, UnchartedX, just search for that or find me on YouTube. You'll find all the work that I'm doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. And until next week on Think Tank, have a wonderful week.
Cheers. Thanks, Robert.